Hello, everyone. Today we will present our comparative analysis of translation strategies based on the short story The Damn Thing by Ambrose Bierce and its Spanish version El Monstruo Maldito. This story originally appeared in English and it was written by Ambrose Bierce, a 19th century American author known for his dark and ironic tales. Our source and target text come from a bilingual edition where the Spanish translation and original English version are printed on facing pages. The publisher's note explains that the translation was done simultaneously page by page and that some retouching of the original version was necessary to make the paragraph fit visually. Most importantly, the editors clearly state that they aimed for a modern translation that favors the ultimate meaning and narrative flow over literacy accuracy. As a result, they took certain liberties, prioritizing comprehension and readability. This makes the book especially interesting for analyzing how professional translators balance fidelity and naturalness using different translation strategies. Now, let's move on to an overview of the strategies found in this research project.
For our analysis, we relied on the model proposed by Vinay and Darbonet, 1995, later expanded upon by Bernd, 2014. According to these authors, there are two main categories of translations, direct and oblique. Direct strategies include literal translations, borrowing and calque, and oblique strategies include modulation, transposition, equivalence, and adaptation. In our comparison, we identify 5 of these strategies, and they are literal translation, modulation, transposition, equivalence, and adaptation. We will now explain each strategy using 2 examples from the text. So let's move on to the first strategy.
Well, the first strategy is literal translation, which Byron in 2014 described as translating closely and only deviating when necessary for grammar or clarity. We have some examples from the book, and in the first one, and the source text, we have he was dead, while in the target text, we have era un muerto. This translation is faithful to the original and follows the grammatical norms of Spanish with no changes in meaning. In the second example, and the source text we have, the man with the book was not reading aloud. While in the target text we have, el hombre del libro estaba leyendo en voz baja. Again, the structure and core meaning are maintained almost exactly. This supports Byron's point that literal translation is common even in non-technical texts when form and meaning allow it. Now move on to the next strategy.
The second strategy is modulation, which involves changing the point of view or perspective to make the sentence more idiomatic in the target language. These concepts come from Vinay and Darbonet in 1995, and it is expanded by Byrne in 2014. In example number 1, in the source text, we have the dead man only was without expectation. And in the target text, we have excepto el cadáver. The translator changed the sentence structure and viewpoint completely, which reflects what Byrne calls a free modulation. Now in example number 2, in the source text, we have strange cries of night birds, so different from those of birds of day. And in the target text, we have los extraños sonidos de las aves nocturnas, tan diferentes del canto de los pájaros durante el día. Here, cries become sonidos, showing a shift from a poetic image to a more general expression. According to Byrne, this is often done when literal translation would result in something unidiomatic. Now let's move on to the third strategy.
Our third strategy is transpositions, also called recategorizations. This involves changing the grammatical category of a word or phrase without changing the meaning. This concept is described in detail by Bernd, 2014. Now we have some examples. Example number 1, source text. His arms at his sides. Target text. Con los brazos unidos a los costados. The noun phrase in English is transposed into a prepositional phrase in Spanish, making it more natural. Second example, source text. The person reading was a trifle different. Target text. El que leía era algo diferente. Again, a noun is replaced by a relative clause, improving the flow of the target text. So, according to Byrne, transpositions like these are often optional, chosen to improve fluency and clarity. So, let's go to the next strategy.
The next strategy is equivalence, which is used when a word or phrase in the source language is replaced by an idiomatic or culturally appropriate expression in the target language. This is defined by Binet and Darbernet 1995 as a way of replicating the same situation using different wording. We have some examples from the book, and the first one, in the source text we have, he was clad as those who dwell in cities. While in the target text, we have vestía como la gente de la ciudad. Instead of a direct translation, the translator finds a more idiomatic way to express the same idea, so it sounds more natural for the target audience. In the example number 2, in the source text, we have stories in general, not yours. While in the target text, we have leo cuentos en general, no me refería solo a los suyos. The irony is preserved, but the structure is completely different. As Byron explains, equivalence is often used for fixed expressions, idioms, and so on. So now, move on to the new strategy.
Finally, we have adaptation, which is considered by Binet and Darbenet from 1995 as the extreme limit of translation and should only be used when there's no equivalent cultural reference in the target language. So in the first example, in the source text, we have, his coat would hardly have passed muster in San Francisco. And in the target text, we have, en San Francisco, su ropa apenas habría resultado aceptable. The idiom past muster doesn't exist in Spanish, so the translators adapted to a cultural neutral expression in Spanish. Now in example number 2, in the source text, we have, a jest in the death chamber conquers by surprise. And in the target text, we have, un chiste en una capilla mortuoria suele hacernos reír para sorpresa de todos. Here, the translator softens and extends the sentence to adapt the cultural concept of dark humor for a Spanish-speaking audience. As Byrne explains, adaptation can involve paraphrasing or substitution to maintain the message. Now let's move on to the general results and statistics of this project research.
After analyzing the full story, we calculate the approximate use of each strategy based on frequency. So these are our findings. First, literal translation with 40%, modulation with 20%, transposition 15%, equivalence 15%, and finally adaptation with 10%. This supports what Byrne explains. Literal translation is often the most used, but it must be complemented by other strategies to preserve fluency and cultural meaning. In this particular translation, the translator clearly followed the publisher's intentions to prioritize readability and narrative flow, which explains the use of oblique strategies like modulation and adaptation.
Finally, these are the sources we used for this research. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you.
Thank you.